What is not a bullet you dodged, but a huge tactical nuke you dodged? 24 years old. Had a pesky sore on my tongue that was really bothering me. My boyfriend's dad was a dentist, so when I was over at his house one night I asked him to take a look. He recommended I go see an oral surgeon the next day for him to check it out. The next day I decided it was feeling better, so I tried to cancel my apt, but my boyfriend's dad insisted I go. I went, and the oral surgeon pretty much diagnosed it as cancer on the spot. It was aggressive, and by the time of my surgery to remove it, it had already spread to multiple lymph nodes. They ended up removing over half my tongue, followed by chemo and radiation. Given how aggressive it was, I often think that if I had put off the doctor's visit any longer I probably wouldn't have survived. I'm coming up on my 10-year anniversary in January. On a road trip in college with 4 friends. We stopped halfway for a pit stop because I had explosive diarrhea and was getting more sick by the minute. Friends carried on to Vegas and left me with one of the guys who rented us a car to return home. The friends that carried on got into a rollover. 1 died, 2 will be injured for life. My wife and I were prepared to buy a nice riverfront property in 2019, but the owners, her dad and uncle, were dragging their feet. We had our down payment, we were approved for the mortgage, and we had even been living there paying rent. Then the river rose 30 ft/10 and we had to evacuate. The water kept rising. The house was destroyed before we bought it, so we didn't buy it. I had some chest pains one night and woke up my wife to tell her. She got a little scared that it might be a heart attack, and we agreed that I should go to the ER. The nurses were pretty sure it was a false alarm, but would run an EKG as is common practice. In my head I was hoping that the chest pain would come back, not to prove a heart attack, but so that we can find out what the chest pain was. The EKG was done by one veteran nurse and a new nurse. I was watching over their shoulders. Something was flashing on the screen that made both nurses look at each other with disbelief. They ran it again and one nurse went out to the station for help. The other stayed with me and very nicely told my wife and daughter to go back out to the waiting room. A few seconds later 5-6 more people came into the room slowly and calmly and began prepping me for something. It turns out that I was having my second heart attack that night in the ER. The doctors and nurses found an obstruction in my heart and were prepping me to have it cleared and a stent placed. When I got out of surgery, the doctor who placed the stent told me, "You probably picked the best time and place to have a heart attack, right here in the air." My father-in-law was working on construction of a power plant and was scheduled work Sunday, was a union pipe fitter. Saturday he got a call from another company asking him to run a job much closer to his house. Think 5-minute commute versus 50. So he accepted and didn't go to the power plant job Sunday. That day there was an explosion at the plant and people in the crew he was working with wound up getting killed. The second floor of the house I was renting collapsed a month after I moved out. Edited to add. Apparently a water pipe sprung a leak shortly after we left. We weren't in any trouble. There was an apartment I really wanted, but at the last minute I found a slightly better one. The apartment I almost moved into burned to the ground a month later. I was moving abroad to do a post-grad degree. My flight was to leave out of Newark early morning on 9/11. A family friend who worked in the towers kept prodding me to move my flight to the afternoon and come visit him in the office so he could show me around. My parents were pressuring me to go as well since it was a good networking opportunity. I was on the fence, but decided not to since I was a poor student and didn't want to pay the cab fare from my hotel in NJ to Lower Manhattan. Our friend made it out, thankfully, and I'm guessing I would have well, but no way would I want that experience burned in my memory. I interviewed at a company in NH that made jams, baking mixes, lollipops, etc. for a technical job. The president, the owner's daughter, spent most of the interview dumping on their current consultant and making fun of all things, his degrees. That initially turned me off. Then, speaking with the owner, he makes it a point to take a call and tell the person on the other end, "I'll pay you when I pay you, cash flow issues." His question about my education was, "What can your fancy degrees do for me?" Then, when I met the VP of marketing, she asks me how many recalls I've done. None. That's not what I do. Wait, what interview is this? I declined their offer. Fast forward maybe 5 years. I'm talking to a guy about doing some consulting work for him and we get in the subject of this company. He had interviewed there as well. He also got the vibe and declined. Turns out, they were planning on selling the company and were beefing it up for appearances. It also turns out, after the sale, that they had spent the previous months sending current clients to their next endeavor. They almost went to jail for their financial and business shenanigans. Would not have been happy to get caught in that mess. We went to Thailand in 2003 for Christmas. I spent a number of years there in the early 90s as a kid and loved it so much that we were gonna do it again the next year. Spent Christmas watching the sun come up on a beach at Phuket again. We had the tickets and everything, but because of some new fallout from an Enron adjacent scandal, my dad wasn't allowed to leave the country. He wasn't implicated, but was in the C-suite of a credit card company, and all such people were under travel advisory. Anyway, the very hotel we were gonna stay at got 100% wrecked by that tsunami, so I guess we got lucky. I used to own a gym with a partner. I sold my half of the company and took a boring but stable government job about 3 months before the pandemic. I was briefly engaged to a man who has since cheated on his gorgeous, intelligent, sweet wife hundreds of times. They are separated, but have 2 children and will likely reconcile. I broke our engagement when he said that he thought it was perfectly okay for a man to cheat on his wife if they'd been married for a while and he'd gotten bored. Oddly enough, he didn't believe a woman was entitled to do the same. I feel so badly for his poor wife now. He began cheating on her 2 years into their marriage when she was pregnant with their first child. I met a girl one summer and she fell head over heels for me. She even ditched her fiancé for me. But when she went back home at the end of summer, they got back together and got married. I saw her again the following summer, and she wanted to pick up where we left off, but I said no. I ran into her years later. She told me all about her Shrek's life, and how her husband could no longer satisfy her, so she was hooking up with random strangers from the internet while he slept in the spare room. They had 2 kids by that time. I felt sorry for them. My manager was trying to have me fired for underperformance, and I was so depressed at the time that I believed I was an awful employee. The place I work has a whole song and dance routine just to get someone a verbal warning, let alone fired. So, she tried to get me to take a severance payment so that I'd leave and save her the trouble. I had to take sick leave shortly after that conversation, and while I was gone, she initiated the formal process to have me fired. I was able to drag things out for a couple of months, and during that time, I discovered she'd falsified documents to make me look like a lost cause, presenting a dossier to HR demonstrating her statements were provably misleading, and documenting every time she failed to follow proper procedures turned everything around. I got moved to a better job on a better team, and spent a solid year rubbing it in her face how well I was doing, and ensuring it got back to her whenever I got praise from the department head. It was pretty annoying that she didn't get fired, but there would have been too much blowback on management if she had. Still, I went from the verge of unemployment to unequivocal success. I had just moved to Colorado by myself, and for whatever reason my mum was encouraging me to get out of the apt and go see the new Batman movie. That was the night of the theater shooting, and not only was that the theater, but it was also the showing I was considering going to. I stayed up late playing League of Legends instead and woke up to a lot of texts and missed calls. Probably not ideal for my family's blood pressure that I slept in pretty late that day too. Back in college, ex cheated and got prego. Blamed it on me, involved her family and all. I was willing to file a case in court with medical legal as needed. Ex got too pressured as I was talking to her dad about medical tests etc. Out of nowhere she admitted that I wasn't the father and it was some classmate she had a fling with. When I was 11 I started losing vision in my left eye and eventually went completely blind in about 2-3 weeks. After lots of testing we found that I had a brain tumor in my left optic nerve that would likely spread quickly. They gave me a year and a half to live in the best case scenario with treatment. They got the eye surgically removed, started me on radiation and chemo, and luckily I responded well to it. Cancer's long gone, I'm now a cyclops, and happy to be disease free. In uni me and my 2 best friends were drinking, playing Mario Kart and just shooting the shoot. We were hungry and wanted food. I said let's just make a tombstone pizza, because we've been drinking and most delivery services were closed at 1:30 AM. One said he's fine to drive. I said no bad idea. He got the other guy to go with. McDonald's usually doesn't take 2 hours to get, so eventually I went for a scooter ride since McDonald's was less than 2 miles away. I noticed there's a taped off spot on the bridge right before McDonald's with a crane, cops and an ambulance. They curbed the car and drove it off the bridge and into the shallow creek top first and died on impact. I dodged the nuke of death, but ate the bullet of survivor's guilt for nearly 5 years. Nuke dodge number 1. X had some type of breakdown. I woke up with her standing over me with a butcher knife. She in some sort of catatonic state. I didn't move. I don't think she saw that I was awake. Then she left the room after a while. Came back into our bedrooms on butcher knife, got in bed, snuggled me until it was time to get up. Then she made me some great waffles for breakfast as cheerful as ever. Didn't get stabbed, but still have trouble sleeping unless I'm alone in the room. Nuke dodge number 2. Another ex cheated on me. She had wanted a baby. We both did, to be honest. So, she ended up getting married to the dude she cheated on me with. They had a baby, then she cheated on him and they got divorced. So wife's boyfriend is paying the child support. Life is freaking good.